Well, thanks, Stephanie. Okay, so I'm going to talk about PAMGuard today. I'm a postdoc at the university, or Aarhus University in Denmark, living in the UK. I'm going to do this in like 3 stages. So first of all, I'm going to talk a little bit about generalized acoustic monitoring. Then I'm going to talk about the history and sort of philosophy behind PAMGuard. And then finally, we're going to do a demonstration of the software and the latest super duper unreleased version. So what could possibly go wrong? Um, so the many environments are dark places. Nighttime in the terrestrial environment and in the marine environment, when you go sort of a few tens of meters underwater, then you are in pitch black often. Um, and lots of different species of animals have evolved to use sound to communicate, for social cohesion, listening for predators. And some species, especially species in the marine environment, have evolved to use sound as one of their primary sensory modes. So, for example, dolphins and porpoises, beaked whales and sperm whales, they produce these sort of echolocation clicks, which bounce off prey, and then they can listen for the echoes and use them to hunt and capture prey where they in the marine environment where they might be visually impaired. Same goes for bats in a nocturnal environment. And what we can do as researchers is that we can eavesdrop, we can listen to all of these biological and environmental sounds. And you might ask yourself, all right, well, what can we do just by listening to animals? Well, actually, there's like a remarkable number of applications. Um, so there exists a comprehensive statistical framework for working out the abundance of vocalizing animals in an area. And so knowing the number of animals is like a key conservation metric. That alone would warrant the use of acoustics, but there's loads of other applications such as mitigation. If we're building wind turbines, for example, we might want to listen in real time to check if there's animals around and then stop doing the activity if it's deemed dangerous. We can look at noise, which is an ongoing and increasing conservation issue, noise pollution. There are lots of sort of academic and blue skies research applications. For example, dolphins have this really complex repertoire of whistles that is really interesting to investigate. We could use acoustics for even fine-scale tracking of animals underwater. So you can see a sort of spiral dive profile of a sperm whale there, which was in a guy, Brian Miller's PhD. And he did that just using four floating devices in the water. And then there are also direct conservation applications. So listening for gunshots in parks and to combat poaching, or a project I was involved in recently, listening for fish bombing blasts or illegal fish bombing blasts. So it's really useful, and in the decades that I have been working in acoustic, or the decades, sorry, I've seen a huge transition in hardware. So the species I study is a harbor porpoise, and it uses echolocation clicks, which are 130 kilohertz. So that means we need to sample about 300 to 500,000 samples per second to be able to record their sounds. And that used to be, when I started, that used to need like a big rack of equipment. And then about 5 years in, we could do the same thing on a device that was maybe about slightly more power hungry than a mobile phone. And in the last few years, that again has dropped an order of magnitude in power consumption and size. And now we can do it on devices that are like smaller than this coffee thing. So, and that's in the marine environment. In the terrestrial environment, we've seen the audio moth, which is an open source sort of credit card sized high frequency acoustic recorder, and that's sort of revolutionizing and in the process of revolutionizing hardware in the terrestrial space. But so that's great, because that means we can record way more data, and way more data means that we get higher quality ecological indexes or data from that. But that also leaves us with a problem. So when you record sounds, it's this like complex mix of biological environmental, and now anthropogenic sounds. And you often want to just pick out a particular type of sound. It might be like a particular species, for example. And what we're doing is if we've got this huge quantity of data, we can't, as a human, just listen and pick out those sounds, or even, visualize the data as a spectrogram and sort of mark out those sounds. That is no longer feasible with when we have large-scale data analysis. So we're left to this situation. So if we were to use an, oh, is that beeping me or you guys? Anyway.
I think it's you. I actually was thinking that your talk was just nicely interactive.
Yeah,
no, that's you.
But anyway, okay. I don't know where that is coming from or why, but let's see what happens. Okay, let me just see if I can switch this off. I'll switch my speakers off just for now.
Okay.
I don't know what's happening there.
Screen share to echolocate you.
Let's give it another go. All right, so where are we at? Right, so we have automated algorithms, and those algorithms give us the speed that we need in order to analyze the data. But what automated algorithms find it really difficult to do is cope with inconsistencies in data for which they haven't been trained. So this, and what I'm talking about here is like the simplest energy detector right up to the state-of-the-art deep learning AI algorithms that we are sort of researching at the moment. And because the ocean is full of these this huge variety of biodiversity, that means there's a huge variety of soundscape. And so applying one automated algorithm to another environment may cause problems. It may not work. It may not be able to cope with the type of data that's there. Humans are really slow and we're inherently inconsistent, but we're excellent at pattern recognition, and we can cope with unexpected inconsistencies in data. And a good example of this is CAPTCHA, which, these like really annoying letters have lines and stuff through them. Well, the reason that those worked, and sort of they're becoming less common now, I guess, but is that automated algorithms find it really difficult to sort of crack them because, there's all these inconsistencies. And another good example of this is dolphin whistles. So here's a spectrogram, and it shows 2 channels of acoustic data with dolphin whistles. And the sort of colorful lines are an automated algorithm's attempt to trace the contours. Now, I think that I could probably train up anyone to do this better than the best algorithms we have at doing this at the moment. Even a child, I think, could do it better. And that's just because we're just excellent at pattern recognition. And so that leaves us with this situation where we have humans on the one hand who are really good at finding these inconsistencies in data and pattern recognition, and automated algorithms which we require for large-scale data analysis. And so how do we reconcile those two things? And the answer to that is software. And what we want a piece of software to do is give us access to the latest automated algorithms. But we want it to also give us really powerful visualizations of the results, so that the automated algorithms can pick out the areas of data that are of interest, and at least some of those areas can be validated by a human analyst. So we can still have a human in the loop somewhere. So that requires these really powerful visualization tools which work at sort of different temporal scales and present us with the data in lots of different ways, so that we can take advantage of this human ability to see patterns and inconsistencies and catch data or automated algorithms when they might not be working. What else do we need from a piece of software? Well, I believe, and some people may disagree with me, but I think that all scientific software should be open source for transparency. We need the basic signal processing tools such as decimators and calculating fast Fourier transforms and all that kind of stuff. And if anyone's ever tried to do a large-scale acoustics program where they have got tens of recorders or something like that, then data management is a key issue. And so we need a piece of software to be able to manage our data for us well as well. All right, so second part of the talk. This is the idea behind PAMGuard. So PAMGuard, before there was a piece of software called RainbowClick, which was developed by a guy called Doug Gillespie, who actually works in this institute and is one of my colleagues. I'm actually too young to ever have used it. Sorry, Doug. But it was by all accounts a great piece of software, and it was just used in marine acoustics. They would tow it behind a boat, tow a towed array behind a boat, and use RainbowClick to detect place. And then Doug Gillespie and Jonathan Gordon came up with this idea in 2003 that they wanted to build a sort of generalized piece of acoustic software to sort of replace RainbowClick, but also to do a lot more things. And the sort of concept behind PAMGuard is that it is built on Java and it's open source, so that Java will mean that it can deal with all the hardware changes over time, and open source means that the research community can use PAMGuard, but also give back to it by either altering the source code or by providing algorithms that they're developing. And the idea behind the software was that whilst sort of RainbowClick might have been this sort of house, here's an analogy, that did a specific thing, PAMGuard is like the foundations of a skyscraper. So it's designed to be that it can grow, that new algorithms can be added over time, new methods, new visualizations, new displays, and all that. And it's building on sort of decades of research in acoustic groups, such as the one here in St Andrews and Aarhus. And it achieves that by being a modular system, right? So when you open PAMGuard, it's completely blank. It doesn't do anything. And what it allows you to do is to design an acoustic workflow. And in that workflow, you can have signal processing tools, you can have automated algorithms, you can have displays such as maps and spectrograms, etc. And one of the really cool things about PAMGuard is that all of that works both in real time and in post-processing. So you can use the same workflow, attach it to a sound card, which will sort of analyze and detect, I don't know, let's say dolphin whistles in real time, or you can just take a recorder out of the sea after a year and process terabytes and terabytes of acoustic data from that recorder. And the other thing about PAMGuard is that it's got lots of hardware integration, but I'm not going to get into that in this talk. And there are loads and loads of modules that are now available in PAMGuard. The ones that we have in bold here, these are the ones that we're going to look at in the examples. But as you can see, we're kind of only scratching the surface of the number of different types of modules that are there. Right, and the final thing which I was talking about before is data visualization. So PAMGuard provides lots of different data visualization tools, from looking at your sort of whole year-long data set to zooming right into the individual waveform of an echolocation click, spectrograms, click displays, maps, and all of that. Okay, so that's the second part of the talk. Right, so 2 examples. We're going to look at bats and harbor porpoises. They are 2 species which both echolocate to hunt for prey. And the harbor porpoise is my study species, and I've been recently getting into bats, which is very exciting. So the first data set we're going to look at is a audio moth recording in Denmark. And there are several species of bats in this recording, and we are going to use AI to figure out which species are there. So let's see. Right, so first thing, start PAMGuard. Okay, so here we go. I'll just get rid of this for now. And the first thing that we do when we start PAMGuard is we create what we call a PSFX file. So I'm just going to call this WILDLABS.NET because I tested this twice to make sure it wasn't going to crash or do anything strange. And so that PSFX file that saves all the data or all the settings, so that you only need to set PAMGuard up once, and then you can just open that file and all your settings will be saved there for you. So we open PAMGuard and we're left with this blank screen, right? So it does nothing. I press the go button, nothing will happen. So we have to add in modules. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up this thing called the data model. And this data, I'm just going to resize this. This data model shows the modules that we've added. So the first thing we might do for in our data model is we will add sound acquisition. We need to acquire sound from somewhere. So that's a sensible first module. And I'll go to the settings menu and I'll look at the sound acquisition. We could acquire sound from a device or we can acquire it from files. So I'm just going to go down this drop-down menu and say I want to acquire it from files. And then on this desktop, I have some files. Here we go. These are the audio moth files. You can see here it's figured out the sample rate, the number of channels, and I'm just going to, I think the audio moth has a 2 volt peak-to-peak voltage range, but we'll see. All right, next module, we are going to add a detector. So we want to detect back calls. So we're going to add a click detector. And this is going to be renamed to a call detector because we call back calls calls. Okay, so you can see here in the data model that the click detector is connected to my sound acquisition source. So the sound acquisition sends the raw data to the click detector. Right, so what else? I want a spectrogram, so I'm going to add in a spectrogram engine. So this is going to calculate fast FFTs, fast Fourier transforms, of the data. And then I'm just going to go into the settings, and I'm just going to set the hop size here a little higher so that we don't completely destroy our processor on this computer. You don't really need to do that, but I'm just doing it for the sake of the demonstration. And then we're going to add in a measure of the soundscape. So we're going to look at long-term spectral average. So we just add in the long-term spectral average module. And then we go to the settings. And let's make the measurement interval 5 seconds because we're dealing with high-frequency data. Okay, so you can see here the data model is sort of evolving a little bit. We have the sound acquisition is now going to the call detector. It's going to the FFT spectrogram engine, and all those data are being sent. The FFT data is then being sent to the long-term spectral average. Okay, so let's also add in a noise band monitor. We want to calculate third octave noise bands. And then we select the data source as just the raw data from the sound files. And let's do a number of different bands here. And so that will calculate third octave noise bands for us. All right, so you can see that noise monitor is now connected up here in the acquisition as well. Okay, we're getting there. Okay, so this is the data model that I'm going to use for the bat analysis. And what that's going to do is it's going to pick out the click detector is just an energy detector, and it's just going to pick out any kind of sound that's a transient. So it's not going to do species classification or anything like that just now. And what I need to do is I need to set it up for bats because essentially this is the default here for dolphins, and bats have much longer calls than dolphins do. So I'm not going to go into what these settings are because we'll be here all day. But if anyone's interested in that, I can tell them why I'm setting things the way I'm setting them here. Okay, and then we're also going to make sure that we go into air mode, because decibels unhelpfully are referenced to 20 micropascals in air, and they're referenced to 1 micropascal in water, and 1 micropascal is the default in PAMGuard. So we're going to go to air, and then you'll see things like this is called settings is now called a microphone array instead of a hydrophone array. We're going to make that amplitude time. We're going to save our configuration, and I think that is now all set up. Oh no, hang on a minute. I've got to add some things. I've got to add a database so everything saves. We've got to save something, so we've got to add these modules to save stuff. PAMGuard, a binary store, and then I've got to tell it, I've got to create the database somewhere. And I've got to set this binary store somewhere. We'll just create a new folder and call test for now. Alrighty, so when I click the go button here, stuff should begin to process. Yeah, okay. Oh, and okay, so we can see if I pause it that we are detecting a few back calls. So here we go. Here are some back waveforms. One of the things is that there's a bunch of noise down here that we probably don't want in our recordings. This is just a lot of this is just gump. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do some filtering in the click detector. So I'll start off the data going in to be I'll start it off with filtering the raw data that's going in just a little bit, and then I'll say to the click detector, okay, I only want you to look at data when you're detecting stuff between around 23,000 and 90,000 hertz, which is about where the bat species are, and I want you to have a bit of a steeper filter, and this is just showing you the filter here. So if we do that, and then also let's just add a spectrogram display so we can see the spectrogram in real time. Spectrogram, new display, bring that up there. Okay, I'm always pressing the save configuration thing, by the way. It's a good idea, just in case PAMGuard crashes, which obviously never happens. But okay, so now we are processing the data, and I bring the spectrogram down here. You can see that there are a few back calls here, and they're a bit difficult to pick out. Oh, this thing has decided to stay for some reason. Okay, so that will go and process through our entire data set, and it might take a long time to do. So I'm just going to exit this now. You would leave that. So PAMGuard works in two modes. It's like a real-time mode and a viewer mode. And the real-time mode is what we were just in, real-time mode. And that is for processing the data. Once you process the data, then you can view it in viewer mode and do some extra processing. That's a little bit clunky. I understand it's not very intuitive, and we're looking at ways to integrate those two systems. But I'm now going to open up that data set that I processed, the one I did earlier. Okay, so I remember I created a database. Well, now I point to that database and say, all right, this is the database that I used to process my data. It will open up, and it will say, do you have a folder of storage for your PAMGuard files? And these files contain detection information like clicks. I won't go into why we've got these two systems, but if anyone's curious, I can tell you why. There's a good reason for it. And then, okay, this is the right location. Just click OK. And then it's going to give us this in viewer mode. Okay, so we have a different tab here. If I go to the data model, you can see it's the same data model that we used before. And here is something called the data map. And that data map allows us to visualize the data that we have processed. And so this is just an hour of recording. And we have here a sort of waterfall spectrogram of all the call detections that we made. We have the long-term spectral average here, and we have the results from the noise band monitor. And this is a log scale, by the way, just if you can't see that. And what I can do is I can now sort of navigate through the data set. So if I right-click here and go center data here, I can go into the click detector and I can see what it detected. Cool. All right. And these are all back calls up here, and but a lot of this stuff is just gump. So this is just random noise created. You know, these are not true detections. So we have detected a bunch of back calls, but we've also got a load of false positives, is what we would call it. And then we can look at our noise band results, and we can just sort of navigate through the data like that as well. All right. So so what I've done is I've added a module called to detect the bats. I'm going to add a module called the deep learning classifier, and this classifier will run on the click detections, and it will attempt to classify them to species using an AI model developed by a colleague in Germany, using a really cool Python library called AnimalSpot, and you should check it out. So, I've imported this model here. So these are the settings for the deep learning classifier, and it's just a case of navigating to the model, and then PAMGuard knows how to set up all the signal processing chains and everything that the model requires, because that's in metadata that's included in the model. And the reason that metadata is in the model is because we've been working with these several libraries that are used for developing acoustic deep learning classifiers, and so we've been developing sort of compatibility like that. Okay, so we set up a deep learning classifier here, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to attempt to classify some of these calls. So we're not waiting around. It takes quite a long time to process data. I'm just going to look at 30 seconds of data here. I'm going to go to an area where there might be some common registers. Make this 30 seconds as well. Let me just find, here we go. Let's have a look. Okay, yeah, all right. So we're going to go reclassify detections. Here's our deep learning classifier, and I'll click start. Hopefully this will work. Okay, so it's now processing through all the clicks, but only the clicks that I've selected in this window. If I wanted to the entire data set, I could just go all data here, and it would chug through the whole data set, but I'm only interested in the ones here. So I come up here and I see, okay, this is definitely a common purpose drill. And here, if you see the tooltip, you can see the different predictions that the deep learning classifier has made. And Pippi down here, which is the correct species, is both 1. So it's been classified correctly. Cool. So that's AI classification of bats. If I want to investigate that a little bit more, I can use a different display. So this is the PAMGuard's TV display, we call it, and it allows you to visualize time data in many different ways. So here are those calls again, and I just want to confirm that this is actually the correct species. So here we go. I can have a look and say, okay, maybe I want to see its FFT, and yeah, okay, yeah, that's definitely correct. Maybe I just want to check the results here, and yeah, that's the correct prediction for that species. Note here, audio moth. If there's any audio moth people, there's some really bad aliasing stuff going on here. So I don't know if that's been fixed in the new versions, but yeah. Right, and we can look at the data at lots of different scales. And once I'm kind of done with the analysis, say I want to export some data, I can just go there, select it in this menu, and I can export it directly to MATLAB, and that will save a map file that's got all those waveforms and all the information from those detections. Or I can save a sound file or an R structure, and you can export the data. Cool. And you can also use various libraries to export all the data. That's an entire PAMGuard dataset. Righto. So that is the bat example done. I think I've got just about enough time to show you the porpoise example as well. I'll say goodbye to this. And I'm just going to open the porpoise example in the background. Here we go. So that might take a few seconds. So, right, so let me just go back to the PowerPoint here. Okay, I had bad example just in case I forgot to show people that. So, right, porpoises. This is a really cool project. So, tidal turbines, these are like underwater wind turbines, and they're really something that Scotland wants to become like a world leader in, and I think probably is at the moment. And they have a great advantage in renewable energy, and that tide is totally predictable, unlike wind. But there's a problem in that we are concerned that porpoises or dolphins might collide with the blades, which would be fatal. So one of these turbines we instrumented up with 12 high-frequency hydrophones sampling at 500 kilohertz each. So that's 6 million samples per second, which we then stream via fiber optic cable to shore to a PC running PAMGuard, and PAMGuard in real time then analyzed the data. And the reason for that is because that quantity of data is like a terabyte a day and just become totally unmanageable. And this project was running for over a year. And so PAMGuard would detect clicks and whistle contours, and it would compress the, it would decimate the data and save the sort of low frequency part, which is the most complex part usually, and did all of that on the fly. And the reason we had 12 hydrophones is that we could actually localize the position of the porpoises as they came towards the turbine. And the reason I kind of wanted to show you this data set, actually this is just a cool picture, it's the turbine going in the water. But the reason I wanted to show you this data set is that this thing was going for years. And so we were able to have what essentially must have been a 500 terabyte data set on one hard drive just after analyzing it in PAMGuard. So let me go back here, and this is so I can't show you the processing of the data here because it was actually all done in real time, and so I don't have the we don't have the wave files for it. So I'll just show you the data model for this. It's a little bit more complicated than the one we used for bats. The main addition is that we have a decimator which decimates the data, and then those decimated data are passed to an FFT algorithm, which then goes on to this whistle detection algorithm, and that's to detect what was primarily to detect dolphin whistles. Right, and so so because we have like these 12 hydrophones and they were all arranged in clusters, then we can actually calculate a bearing, and we can display for each detected click, and we can display that bearing in PAMGuard. And so these axes are actually bearing instead of amplitude as they were for bats. And if I go to the data map, you can see that the amount of data we have here. So this is clicks again, these are whistles, this is noise, and long-term spectral average. And you can see this like signature here, right? That's a tidal cycle. So when the tides in these areas are really, really strong and the flow noise over the hydrophones means that you get lots of false positive detections. So you're seeing these false positive detections signature here in the whistles, the clicks, and then the soundscapes of the noise and the LTSA also show it. And going back to the click detector, you can just see like there's just loads and loads of false positive detections. This is all just gump. And what we want to find in this gump are porpoises. And even though porpoises have this amazingly like stereotype call, it's still really difficult to make an automated classifier that is really good with them. And I can talk more about that later. But what we did was we ran this classifier in PAMGuard that was kind of okay. But you can see that it's got this like signature, which is the false positives that the classifier is producing with the tide as well, with different tidal states as well. So as an analyst, what you can do is you can look through this data set, and we'd never be able to go through this whole thing by ourselves. But we can look through it and we can kind of go, okay, is there something inconsistent in this pattern? And you can begin to see things like these little spikes here, and you can go, hey, that's a bit weird because that doesn't look like the rest of the detection. So I can zoom into that point, and then I can go, I can have a look in my click detector around that time and see if I see anything weird. And lo and behold, if I come here, then I can start to see this like group of these clicks. These are definitely porpoise clicks. And the other thing that tells me that this is a porpoise is that the bearing is changing slowly. So these are part of a click chain. As the porpoise passes the turbine, it's like going this way, and so the bearings that are calculated by the hydrophones are changing slowly. So I can then, as an analyst, I can then sort of just annotate these and go, all right, yeah, this is a porpoise, that's a verified porpoise, and go back to the data map and then be like, right, where's the next section? So that was what I was talking about before, where an automated algorithm points you to the interesting sections of the data. I'm not going to be able to go through this entire data set because it's years of data, but that algorithm allows me to go to the interesting sections and to pick out where and to verify. But the better the algorithm, the less false positives I have to deal with, and the faster that you can analyze the data set. And I think I'm probably running out of time there, so I think I'll probably stop.
What a great conclusion. But also what an excellent tutorial. I think there's a slight bit of overwhelm happening in the room. That was so yeah. So everyone, so firstly, thanks, Jamie. That was just such a valuable walkthrough to have recorded, and I think the consensus in the chat was that we would all be watching this back at probably half speed a couple of times to actually follow what you've done. So it was a really great thing to have a walkthrough. Thank you so much.
Yeah. That's
so everyone, if you have questions, drop them in the chat. And just so you're aware, we'll finish on the hour, but we usually actually hang around for a little bit longer, like a half an hour longer. We stop recording and we just have a more of a discussion and a chat with Jamie and with like anyone who's on the call about conservation tech and usually about the topic. So if you want to have a chat to Jamie, hang around afterwards. Now, as for the Q&A, I'd actually like to kick it off with a question about your work. You've just given us a whiz-through walkthrough about how to how to use PAMGuard. But I was more wondering, what are you working on right now? There's so many big challenges in AI and developing tools for acoustic data and conservation. What's the big challenge you're looking at and working on right now?
Well, I've got several projects actually. The two that I've kind of been working, or three I've been working on, are developing classifiers for bats and enabling that in PAMGuard, which we just saw. And the other thing is bycatch. So that's my kind of sort of research focus, and bycatch is like the largest cause of mortality in dolphins and toothed whales in the world. 200,000 roughly die every year, and it's causing the extinction of at least one species very soon, probably another quite soon after. And so I'm looking at the mechanisms behind, why do animals with like these amazing sophisticated senses, how can they get entangled in these nets and die, and in such vast numbers? So that's my that's the research I'm doing at the moment.
It's really just picking up on the bat classifier. One of the questions that a lot of people had while coming in and registering for this session was whether PAMGuard, I know it was developed for marine species, but whether it was applicable to terrestrial. So based on that commentary, our terrestrial acoustic folk are able to use it in their work. Is that correct?
Yeah. I mean, it's the principles are all the same, right? And one of the recent additions is the air mode, which means it's not so annoying with like everything called hydrophone and depth instead of height, and having the decibels referenced the wrong way for terrestrial people. So we tried to make it a little bit more terrestrial friendly, and then much of the same stuff, is there, but we're hoping that it will be used more in the terrestrial environment in the future.
That flows nicely into one of the first participant questions, which was from Christos. Christos, I can see your face. Do you have a microphone?
Yes, I do.
You do. Would you like the floor?
Yes, why not? Thank you, Jamie, for your talk. Apologies, I'm in a hotel with dark room.
Yeah, no worries.
I'm on the move, that's why. I have been working with PAM in terrestrial settings to detect gunshots. And you mentioned somewhere fleetingly that you have tried PAMGuard with dynamite fishing. And I was wondering whether there are any of the existing detection algorithms you have that you can add, that at least your gut feeling, whether there is potential in that to use with gunshots in a terrestrial setting.
Yeah, I mean there are algorithms that are so I guess in PAMGuard you can split algorithms into something that we usually split them into detection and classification. So that detection is like an algorithm that will pick out the interesting signs. So there's definitely a detection algorithm for gunshots that will pick out gunshots, but there's not a classifier for gunshots in there. So the detector will probably have quite a high false positive rate, because it's like more general. It's looking for like a sharp sign.
This is what we do, though. Apologies, Stephanie. I'm just having like a bit of clarification follow up on that. Even what we're using now, which is like say Raven Pro as a software, and then we have a standalone gunshot detector that runs. It has probably 99 false and 1 true, but there is a way of relatively quickly visualizing it, not even listening all of it. And I see there was a question also, Veronica, how can we remove false positives? How can we look at the false positives in a way that we as a second filter, a human user, can remove them? You went over with your cursor, and your cursor in what you're looking, but is there a way of sort of having like a postage stamp, but you see all different ones and you can reject and accept? Because that would make this a very useful tool for what I'm thinking, at least, and hopefully other people as well.
Yes, yeah. There's a clip display that just puts it like that, and then there's annotations, and there's a whole huge annotation framework in PAMGuard. So you can manually go through your data sets as well. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
No worries.
Awesome. Carly, did you have questions you wanted to put to now? You were next.
Yeah, it was kind of like while you were going, but you were set like there's like 2 different interfaces or something. What can you just clarify what that?
So because it's a modular program, right? You can design any. You can just say which interface do you want. So there's like, so there's the one that you saw, like the call detector one first, which maybe looks a bit more dated. That's just one display that's been programmed, and then they added a module for another display. And so that's the kind of thing about PAMGuard is like it's just a like it's modular, so you can just add the bits that you want and the different types of displays that you want. And that's been super flexible, but also it means that it's that flexibility has a downside, and the downside is that it's not particularly intuitive to use, right? So so it can be difficult, like initially getting over those technical barriers. But I have some great tutorials on GitHub, so to help you get over that.
There's some links in Jamie's episode page on Wild Labs if you want to find his GitHub and find those videos as well. Good plug.
Yeah.
Next person who's up is France. Did I say your name correctly? I can see your face. I don't know if you've got a mic. You do. All right, off you go.
I should have. Can everybody hear me?
We can.
Good. Okay. So Jamie, thank you so much for this wonderful presentation. I had a couple of questions about the deep learning basis, and one of them was, if you have a model that you're trying to import that's been trained elsewhere in MATLAB, in Python, wherever you train your model, how easy is it to integrate into PAMGuard? And then the second part that's probably related more to the model, like I noticed there are 2 classification scores for the deep learning model you're showing for bats. Are those like, and they were sometimes different? Could you elaborate a little bit on those?
Yeah, sure. So the way that the module works is that you give it a segment length, and it will split so the input data that it has. In this case, that data was calls that were detected by a detector, but it can just be raw streaming data as well. And it will segment those into discrete segments of a certain length, and then it will just go across the whole waveform with those segments. So that's why you get multiple scores, because it scores each segment. The question about a model is that yes and no. So I've been working with Animal Spot and KTOS libraries, which are actually, like, KTOS is an amazing library that is really well documented and has loads of tutorials and stuff on it. And Animal Spot is just about to be released and is the same kind of thing. And that makes it super easy to import a model, because PAMGuard does all of the setting it up. So it knows exactly what it needs, what shape what the input shape is, and all that kind of stuff. But there is an option to import other deep learning models, but it's fiddly. You have to set it up right. But if you have one, we can give it a go. The idea is that it should be able to import at least every PyTorch and TensorFlow model that people make. So,
yeah,
and probably other ones too. But yeah, whether it'll work or not, I'm not sure.
Thank you.
Before I throw to Veronica, Veronica, can you just let me know in the chat if you've got a microphone? I just wanted to throw in a question that came through while people were registering, and are asking about what are the advantages of using PAMGuard over Raven or other software that's out there?
Well, I don't want to diss other software.
Go for it. We're open church here.
Yeah, so every piece of software does like something really well, right? So Raven is great at showing a spectrogram and a waveform, and it's got some other tools as well, and it's got great annotation tools and stuff like that. So that's what you're doing, then I think Raven is good. PAMGuard is really designed for people that are going to have like big data sets. It's designed to handle terabytes and terabytes of data over years. And it also has a lot many different types of classifiers that Raven doesn't have. So yeah, Raven's. I mean, I use Raven sometimes. It's great for things, but I think PAMGuard's more is like down the automated classification train, probably. Yeah.
Awesome.
It's also free.
Yeah, that's a really great answer. Thank you. It's helpful. Veronica, do you want to jump in with your question?
Hi. Yeah, sure. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks for the presentation. My questions, so I'm really not familiar with it. So I was just wondering, is there a specific module you use for different species? Or if people are working, let's say, on data sets where there are more than one species, then how can you go about that? I know it's difficult. I've tried to do it for a long time, but maybe there is a way to recognize different species using either one module or different ones. And also, can you, at that point, count the different detections? So let's say if there are more than one species, can you count dolphin whistles versus humpback whale calls, kind of thing?
Yeah, so, all right, so what we want, right, is we want a piece of software where the acoustics goes in and species comes out, right? That's the, but one of the things I was trying to get like at the start of the talk is that, you know, we're dealing with like this soundscape data is so complex and so variable across different environments that we're nowhere near that. I think we're like that piece of software is a long way away. And so what PAMGuard's about is it's about designing a workflow for a specific like, you know, project that you have. So the answer to your question is like, yeah, okay, there are some things that PAMGuard will do really well, like some species, you know, some workflows where you can get right to the species. And one of the ones, you know, the bat one that I showed you there, that was a workflow that got right to the species at the end, and it's pretty accurate actually as well. So, but it all depends on what species it is, you know, whether it's what type of sound is it, you know, is it like a porpoise, it's just quite an easy sound to classify, or is it something really complicated and you're going to need someone to train up an AI classifier for you? So it all depends on that. And PAMGuard is like a no-code solution for like developing those workflows for individual projects. So it's not that piece of software that's like sound in, species out, unfortunately. One day, when I'm old, I think when I'm old, it will happen. But yeah. So I hope that's. Oh, and your other part of the question, sorry, was that yes, you can use the library. There's a code library in PAMGuard that allows you to export those all the detection files, and then you can just do whatever you want to do. You know, count the number of species and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
Yeah, and you can also export it to Excel and stuff like that if you really want. So.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, Bob, I reckon your question's really quick, so I'm going to let you sneak in. Do you want to jump in?
Okie doke. You hear me okay?
We can.
Excellent. Yeah, just wondering, are you going to develop this into including common acoustic indices in the future? Because if it's a large data cruncher, this is the sort of thing that it'd be really good for. I mean, obviously, if you use our various packages like C-Wave and such like that, have these already. But if you're looking to sort of make it a one-stop shop, as it were, for all of this type of analysis, that would be a really useful feature to have.
Yeah, I know. It's on the. I've wanted to do that. All the sort of eco-acoustic, and you know, all of that kind of stuff. I've wanted to add those in, but the answer is yes, it can be done, and probably fairly straightforward. All the structure and the framework's there, but in the end, it's going to need some funding for someone to do it because coding this kind of stuff takes time. So yeah, it's a great idea, and I'm sure it will happen. But whenever some funding comes along for it, I think.
So need to open the wallet then, do I?
Well, it might not be you personally. You know, often people come up with these ideas and it will get funded as part of an application somewhere sometime. But yeah, it's a really good idea. I mean, I think it would be really useful. Yeah.
Thank you.
So I'm going to finish with a question from the facilitator, because we like closing with a bit of optimism. So Jamie, I'd love to hear what your hopes are for the near future and the near future, and what developments are on the horizon, and what makes you feel really optimistic or hopeful.
So yeah, I think that acoustic monitoring is at a stage where it's sort of coming of age, and we're getting into a new phase with it. And that phase is that it is coming out of academia and specialist research, and it's going to get into the hands of community scientists, less specialized researchers. And if we can develop the hardware and the software to allow people to kind of supercharge that transition, I think that it will lead to some really good conservation outcomes. So I think acoustics is really going to push forward in the next decade, and enable people to monitor their environment in ways that they haven't been able to do before. Pardon me.
What a wonderful way to finish. Thank you so much, Jamie. And thank you everyone for joining us for today's Tech Tutors episode. We will be back next week with a session that is all about eDNA and monitoring terrestrial mammals. So we're moving away from marine, back onto the terrestrial stuff. So join us at the same time for our nose talk, who's joining us from WWF. And if you'd like to stay around, like I said, we do have a nice tech chat after this for a while, and it's a good way to chat and meet other people in the community, or connect with people, as people have been doing in the chat. But otherwise, thank you so much, Jamie, and we'll see you all next week.
Yeah, thanks everyone for listening.